A doctor hands you a cigarette and tells you it'll cure your asthma. A judge sentences a pig to death for murder. And thousands of people gather in the town square not for a festival, for an execution, and they bring their children. And that's only the beginning. Throughout history, human beings have believed things deeply, sincerely, with absolute conviction that today seem completely insane. These weren't fringe lunatics. These were doctors, judges, priests, parents, and kings. People who thought they were doing the right thing. These are 10 bizarre things humans once thought were normal. Some of these will make you laugh, some will disturb you, and one will make you genuinely question what we might be getting catastrophically wrong right now. Let's start at number 10. Number 10. Bloodletting, the cure for everything. Imagine you walk into a doctor's office with a fever. The doctor looks you over, nods gravely, and reaches for a blade. Not to operate, not to remove anything, just to drain your blood. Because too much blood, that's what's making you sick. For over 2,000 years, from ancient Greece all the way to the 1800s, bloodletting was the most trusted medical procedure in the Western world. The theory? Your body contained 4 humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Health meant these humors were balanced. Disease meant one had gotten out of control. And blood? Blood was always the suspect. Physicians would cut open a vein, usually in your arm or neck, and let blood pour freely into a bowl. Sometimes leeches were applied to the skin by the hundreds. The target? To drain enough that the patient visibly weakened. Let that sink in. The sign that the treatment was working was that you looked worse. Here's the shocking part, and this one you won't forget. George Washington, the first president of the United States, died not from illness alone. On the night of December 14, 1799, over the course of 10 hours, his doctors drained approximately 5 pints of blood from his body. 5 pints. That's nearly half the blood in an adult human. He was already sick. The bleeding almost certainly killed him faster. And his doctors? They thought they were helping. They were the best in the country. We look back now, and it seems barbaric. But bloodletting wasn't the work of quacks. It was the establishment. It was what everyone did. To reject it would have seemed as strange to them as rejecting antibiotics seems to us today. But if bloodletting lasted 2,000 years, what are we doing right now that future doctors will look back on in horror? That question is going to follow you through this entire video. Number 9. Cocaine for children. Here's a sentence you might need to hear twice. In the late 1800s, you could walk into any pharmacy and buy cocaine over the counter for your toothache, for your energy, for your mood, for your child's sore throat. Coca-Cola, yes, that Coca-Cola, was originally marketed as a medicinal tonic, and for the first 17 years of its existence, it contained real cocaine. But that's almost the normal part of this story. In 1885, a product called Lloyd's Cocaine Toothache Drops was marketed specifically to children. The packaging featured an illustration of a smiling boy. Parents didn't read this with alarm, they read it with relief. Cocaine was understood at the time not as a dangerous narcotic, but as a wonder drug, a natural stimulant from the coca leaf that reduced pain, increased alertness, and calmed anxiety. Sigmund Freud,
the father of psychoanalysis, wrote an enthusiastic paper in 1884 recommending cocaine as a treatment for depression, morphine addiction, and digestive disorders. He sent it to his fiancée as a gift. He called it a magical substance. And here's the part that genuinely unsettles me. They weren't entirely wrong. Cocaine does do those things, in the short term. The problem wasn't ignorance of its effects, it was ignorance of its cost. The addiction, the psychological destruction, the long collapse. They saw the sunrise and thought it was a permanent state. By the early 1900s, cocaine's darker consequences had become impossible to ignore. The Pure Food and Drug Act of 1906 began regulating such substances, and Coca-Cola quietly replaced its ingredient with caffeine. But for a generation of children, the damage had been done. And nobody, not the parents, not the doctors, not the pharmacists, had any idea they were causing harm. They thought they were being careful.
Number 8. Animals on trial. In 1386, in the French town of Falaise, a pig was arrested, charged with murder, given a trial, assigned a defense lawyer, found guilty, and publicly executed, dressed by court order in human clothing. This was not unusual. Between the 9th and 18th centuries, animals across Europe were routinely put on trial in formal legal proceedings. Horses, bulls, dogs, eels, beetles, and most commonly, pigs, were brought before courts of law, accused of crimes ranging from property destruction to murder. The proceedings were entirely serious. Defense attorneys argued on behalf of their animal clients. Witnesses testified, judges deliberated. In one extraordinary case from 1478, a community of weevils was sued for destroying a vineyard. The judge, recognizing he couldn't rightly deprive them of their God-given sustenance, ordered the town to set aside a designated field for the weevils to eat. The weevils reportedly did not comply. But here's where this stops being funny. The reason animals were put on trial wasn't stupidity, it was a coherent philosophical position. In medieval Christian Europe, the moral order of the universe was God-given and all-encompassing. The law wasn't just a human system, it was a divine one, and if something had disrupted that divine order, something had to answer for it. Animals were not seen as unconscious automatons, they were seen as moral participants in the world. To exclude them from justice would be to say the universe had no order at all. It was a system built on a sincere attempt to make the world make sense. It just happened to involve prosecuting beetles. The last known animal trial in Europe occurred in 1906. A dog in Switzerland was convicted as an accessory to robbery. We are not as far from this as we think. Number 7. Public executions as family entertainment. When a public execution was announced in 18th century London, it wasn't treated like a tragedy. It was treated like a carnival. Vendors set up stalls. Ballads were written and sold about the condemned. The best viewing spots near the gallows at Tyburn could be rented, and they were rented weeks in advance. Parents brought their children, not to traumatize them, to teach them. The public execution was, for centuries, understood as a moral lesson, a theatrical demonstration of justice, of consequence, of divine order. The condemned was expected to perform their death well. A good execution included a speech, perhaps a confession, ideally some visible repentance. The crowd judged the performance. And here's what makes this genuinely difficult to dismiss. The people in those crowds weren't monsters. Studies of crowd behavior at executions show that many wept, many prayed aloud. The emotional response was complex: grief, relief, catharsis, moral seriousness. They believed they were participating in justice. The last public execution in England was in 1868. In France, the guillotine was used publicly until 1939. In the United States, the last public hanging occurred in 1936, attended by an estimated 20,000 people. 1936. That is within the lifetime of people alive today.
In the 1920s, radioactivity was the future. Marie Curie had just won her second Nobel Prize. Atoms were being unlocked, and the mysterious glow of radium seemed, to a generation dazzled by science, like pure life force. So they started selling it. Radium bread, radium butter, radium chocolate. A product called Radiathor, literally radioactive water, was marketed as a health tonic and sold in pharmacies across America. The wealthy drank it daily for energy. One of the most famous cases involved a socialite and athlete named Eben Byers, who drank roughly 1,400 bottles of Radiathor over several years. The Wall Street Journal ran his obituary under the headline, "The radium water worked fine until his jaw fell off." His skeleton was so radioactive that when his body was exhumed decades later, it still registered on a Geiger counter. But the most haunting story belongs to the Radium Girls. Young women hired to paint luminous watch dials at the United States Radium Corporation were told the material was safe. To paint the fine details, they were instructed to point their brushes with their lips. They ingested radium daily, for years. The company knew. Internal documents later confirmed they understood the danger. The women developed radiation poisoning, their bones dissolving from within. Several died. Their legal battle against the corporation in the late 1920s became a landmark case in occupational health law. They didn't just suffer. They changed the world. Because of them, worker safety became a legal right. Their names: Grace Fryer, Edna Hussman, Catherine Schaub, Albina Larice, Quinta McDonald. Remember them.
We're halfway through, and we haven't even reached the strangest belief yet. Drilling holes in people's skulls, mummies ground into medicine, and a sleep pattern so different from ours that it might explain why millions of people today feel like something is wrong with them. Keep watching.
The skull is approximately 9,000 years old. And that hole, that wasn't an injury. That was treatment. Trepanning, the practice of drilling or scraping a hole into a living person's skull, is the oldest known surgical procedure in human history, and it was practiced on every inhabited continent across thousands of years by cultures with no contact with each other. Ancient Peruvians, Neolithic Europeans, pre-Columbian Mesoamericans, medieval physicians, all of them independently arrived at the same conclusion: sometimes you need to open the skull. The remarkable part, many of these patients survived. Archaeologists can tell because the bone around the hole shows signs of regrowth, which only happens if the person lived for weeks or months after the procedure. In some cases, individuals were trepanned multiple times. Why did they do it? The reasons varied: epilepsy, severe headaches, mental illness, demonic possession, to release evil spirits, to enhance spiritual perception, and in some cases, particularly in cultures following battlefield trauma, as actual emergency neurosurgery.
Modern neurosurgeons have reviewed ancient Trepanning skulls and confirmed, in trauma cases, the procedure was medically rational. Releasing pressure from the brain after a head injury can save a life. They stumbled onto something real, wrapped in a story about demons, but real. Which makes you wonder, how many things do we dismiss as superstition that contain a buried kernel of truth?
Number 4. Smoking as medicine. As recently as 1946, cigarette advertisements featured endorsements from physicians, not actors playing doctors, real doctors. Surveys asking which cigarette brand doctors preferred were used as marketing material, with the clear implication that if doctors were smoking, smoking must be safe. For much of the 20th century, cigarettes were prescribed for anxiety, for weight management, for digestion, for asthma. But here's the thing that makes this story darker than just bad advertising. The tobacco companies knew. By the 1950s, internal research confirmed the link between smoking and cancer. Documents later revealed in litigation showed executives writing memos acknowledging the danger while publicly funding studies designed to cast doubt on the science. They didn't just fail to warn people, they actively manufactured uncertainty. The result? Roughly 100 million people died from smoking-related illness in the 20th century alone. 100 million. And many of them started smoking because a doctor told them it was fine. Trust was weaponized.
Number 3. Mummies as medicine. Somewhere in Europe, in the 16th century, a wealthy nobleman is feeling unwell. His physician prescribes him medicine. Ground-up Egyptian mummy. Not metaphorically, not ceremonially, literally, powdered human remains, scraped from unwrapped mummies, mixed into drinks, eaten in paste form, dissolved in wine. For over 500 years, from roughly the 12th to the 17th centuries, mumia, the powder of preserved Egyptian mummies, was one of the most prized medical substances in Europe. It was believed to cure hemorrhages, treat epilepsy, heal bruises, reduce inflammation, and restore vitality. The demand was so high that it created an entire black market industry. When authentic Egyptian mummies became scarce, suppliers began manufacturing fake ones, wrapping recently deceased criminals or plague victims in linen, drying them, and selling the result as genuine antiquities. The people buying these weren't strange. They were the European elite. Kings and queens consumed mumia. Francis I of France reportedly carried a small amount with him at all times. Here is what nobody said out loud. This was, by any modern definition, cannibalism, the consumption of human remains for perceived benefit. It simply wasn't framed that way, and that is perhaps the most revealing thing in this entire video. The same act, in a different frame, becomes invisible.
Number 2. Segmented sleep. Do you ever wake up at 2 or 3 in the morning and can't go back to sleep? Do you lie there feeling like something is wrong with you? What if nothing is wrong with you? What if you're just remembering something ancient? Historian Roger Eckertz spent 16 years researching pre-industrial sleep. What he found in diaries, legal records, medical texts, and literature was startling. Before artificial lighting became widespread, before gas lamps, before electricity, humans did not sleep in one continuous 8-hour block. They slept in 2.
The first sleep began at dusk and lasted roughly 4 hours. Then people woke naturally, often for an hour or two, in what was called the watching hour. They talked, they prayed, they had sex, they reflected on their dreams. Sometimes they visited neighbors. Then they slept again until dawn. This was not insomnia. This was the pattern. Documented consistently across centuries, across cultures, until the Industrial Revolution forced a new schedule onto human bodies. The artificial light of industrialization extended the evening. People stayed awake later. The two-sleep window collapsed into one, and suddenly, waking at 2 a.m. became a disorder. We pathologized a natural pattern. Today, sleep researchers have been able to reproduce the segmented sleep pattern in controlled studies. When removed from artificial light, subjects spontaneously return to it within weeks. Your body has not forgotten. It never forgotten.
Number 1. Lead everywhere. We have saved the most disturbing for last. Not because it's the most horrifying in isolation, but because of its scale, and because of what it might tell us about right now. The Roman Empire, the most powerful civilization of its age, had a lead problem, and they had no idea. Lead was everywhere in Roman life: pipes, cookware, cosmetics, wine vessels. The Romans used a sweetener called sapa, made by boiling grape juice in lead pots, which gave wine a pleasant taste. Lead acetate, as it happens, tastes sweet. It's sometimes called sugar of lead. Roman aristocracy consumed lead constantly. Scholars have calculated that elite Romans may have ingested 3 times the level of lead now considered toxic daily. Lead poisoning causes cognitive decline, emotional instability, impulsiveness, infertility, and eventually death. Some historians have argued, controversially but not without evidence, that chronic lead poisoning in the Roman ruling class contributed to the erratic behavior of emperors like Caligula and Nero, to declining birth rates in the Roman elite, and to the slow administrative deterioration of the empire itself. Rome may have been poisoned from within, by the very vessels that held their wine. But here's the part that makes this item number 1. For most of the 20th century, Americans also had a lead problem: leaded gasoline, lead paint, lead pipes, lead solder in food cans. Researchers studying American crime rates noticed something strange. In the 1990s, crime fell dramatically across the United States. Economists struggled to explain it. One of the strongest predictors? The phase-out of leaded gasoline, which had begun 20 years earlier. The children who had grown up breathing lead exhaust had grown up with measurably reduced impulse control, reduced IQ, and increased aggression. When the lead went away, so did a generation of those effects. We were poisoning ourselves at a civilizational scale, and we had no idea. Or, in some cases, we had every idea and chose not to act. 10 things. Bloodletting. Cocaine for children. Animals on trial. Public executions as entertainment. Radium in your drinking water. Holes drilled in skulls. Cigarettes prescribed by doctors. Mummies eaten as medicine. A forgotten sleep pattern. Lead in everything. None of these practices came from stupidity. None of them came from cruelty. At least, not entirely. They came from people doing their best with what they understood.
from institutions that had calcified around wrong assumptions, from industries that placed profit above people, from cultures where the cost of questioning was too high. Sound familiar? Here is the question I'll leave you with. 100 years from now, what will they say about us? What are we doing right now that future generations will document in a video exactly like this one? Maybe it's factory farming. Maybe it's social media and what it does to children's minds. Maybe it's the way we treat the elderly. Maybe it's something none of us can see yet. Exactly the way the Romans couldn't see the lead in no wine. We have always been the heroes of our own story. That's not uniqueness. That's the human condition. The past isn't strange because people were different. It's strange because they were exactly like us.
And that's 10 bizarre things humans once thought were normal. The uncomfortable truth is that every single person in this video, every doctor, every judge, every parent, woke up each morning believing they understood the world. They were confident, they were certain, and they were wrong in ways they couldn't even begin to see. So were we. If this video made you think, hit the like button. It genuinely helps more people find this channel. And if you want more stories like this, history that sounds impossible, science that went catastrophically wrong, and the hidden patterns behind why humans believe what they believe, subscribe. We post every week. Drop a comment below with your answer to this question. What do you think we're doing today that future generations will look back on in disbelief? I read every single one. See you in the next one.